Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Scott, I want to start with what has happened in Washington during the meeting between Donald Trump and the NATO Secretary General. And he announced that Russia has 50 days to come to the negotiating table. It's some sort of ultimatum issued to Russia. But here is what we've learned from the Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov in Russia. He said that Russia will not accept any attempt to impose demands, let alone ultimatums. And Russia is prepared to negotiate with the United States based on the reality and what's going on the battlefield, but they're not gonna, if they cannot achieve that through negotiations, they're gonna achieve their goals on the battlefield. Your take on the way that Donald Trump somehow, I don't know if his new position on the war in Ukraine or he's trying to convince Europeans, because after all, when you look at the way that he's somehow saying that Europeans are paying for all these weapons that we're sending to Ukraine, but nothing changed, because after all, they're sending weapons to Ukraine to continue this fight. Your take on what's going on with the new position on the part of Donald Trump?
Well, the first thing we have to recognize is that this solidifies the reality that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about peace or a damn about lives in Ukraine. So let's stop the fiction. I mean, you had Scott Jennings, the Republican apologist on CNN, out there saying, Donald Trump, he's the only one out there that, when he talks about, war and peace, it's peace first, peace, then war. I'm like, no, it's not, you idiot. Donald Trump doesn't know what he wants, what he, in terms of, geopolitical alignments. Donald Trump wants his ego massaged. Donald Trump wants to be seen as somebody who matters, somebody who counts. But when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, given the posture he's taken, he doesn't matter and he doesn't count. And Ryabkov made this point clear. There will be no ultimatums. And what Trump is doing is an ultimatum. It's a joke. 50 days. What, the Russians are supposed to go out and buy diapers because they have to change their diapers every day because of fear of Donald Trump's 50-day statement. Sanctions? You're going to sanction Russia? Well, I guess they're talking about sanctioning, the supporters of Russia who buy the Russian energy and the Russian oil, do trade with Russia. Let's see. China. I think Trump just fixed the biggest mistake he ever made about China, which was to impose sanctions on tariffs on China in April. China didn't blink. They withdrew the rare earth minerals and magnetic materials in the U.S. automobile industry, collapsed, and Trump had to go crawling back. And they just fixed it. It looks like they were getting back on track to some sort of trade agreement. And what, he's going to throw it all away by putting 100% sanctions on China now? China will just pull the plug again. This time they won't be inclined to give it back, and the American economy will tank. All those wonderful weapons that Trump wants to build, they all require that rare earth mineral stuff, those magnetics. So it's stupid. Brazil. I think Lula basically said, if you want to sanction us, then we just don't want to do trade with you. Didn't he say a statement like that? We just won't trade with you. Okay. I think they're making this clear. And India, you really think India is going to yield its sovereignty right now? India that's trying to posture itself as a nation that matters. And they're going to go, oh no, the United States is threatening to sanction us. We're going to give up everything, all our standing that we have, and yield to the United States. No, it's never going to happen. That's why there's 50 days, because it will never happen. Trump will extend it. He's looking for diplomacy right now. And what he's going to say is, oh, my threats brought about this great change. But there will be no change, Donnie baby, because the Russians aren't playing your stupid game. Let me remind everybody, Donald Trump started this war. He tries to blame it on Joe Biden, but Donald Trump started this war. All of the policies that are in place that led to the events of February 2022 were put in place by Donald J. Trump. And the Russians know this. Now, the Russians, of course, being the mature, diplomatic, mature nation that they are, will have the door open to diplomacy. And it's better for Russia to talk to the United States than not talk. And so, no matter how unpredictable and outrageous Donald Trump is, I mean, come on, David, outrageous. What do you think the Russians think about Donald Trump's leaked 2024 campaign statement, where he told Vladimir Putin, that I will bomb the you-know-what bovine excrement out of Moscow if Putin moves into Kiev? The statement was never made. Never made. So Donald Trump's a liar, and the Russians are just like, who is this man-child? And that's how they're treating this. What threat is here? The threat of sanctions, I already told you, that will never come to play. First of all, Russia could care less about sanctions, and the big partners out there, they're not gonna yield either, because that's the end of them. That's the end of them as being relevant. And if they come together, their combined impact on the American economy, Trump will never do this. He'll never pull the trigger on this. The weapon systems, 17 what? Batteries, full complement. Holy cow, Donnie, baby, where are you getting them? Germany, they got 12. They ain't giving them up. They might give one or two up. They've already given two up, but they've been blown away. Let's see, Spain could give up some, but they don't have that many to begin with. Give up one. The Netherlands, give up another one. Yeah, we're up to 4, and they're not going to happen overnight. Germany's not going to provide any transit support until they get new stuff in, and the Americans ain't building new stuff, and if they are, it's going to Israel or to replenish American stocks. This is not happening. Donald Trump is there shaking the hands with Rutte, and the other thing is, look at the arrangement. How stupid does Rutte have to be, to believe this stuff? But here's Donald Trump's thing. Hey, Mark, you're going to give up all your weapons to Ukraine. You. And then you're going to buy them from us. And we're not going to spend a penny. If I were Rutte, I would have looked there and said, Donnie, baby, stick it in your ear. You know what? Why don't you go? We've already drafted it up for you. It's a document. Sign it. Get the hell out of NATO. We don't need you. We don't want you. You're useless to us. You mean nothing to us. Because this isn't serious. This isn't serious at all. This is a joke. This is posturing. So you can go to your Republican base, because they're right now, they're mad. They didn't want anything going to Ukraine. But what he can say now is, hey, it ain't American money. Actually, we're making money off this. You remember that in what they did in the past. The Ukrainians saying, no, all this money, it doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to the defense industry that builds it. But that was still taxpayer money being used to do this. There ain't no taxpayer money being used to go to Ukraine. We're just building weapons and selling them to the Europeans. But this is like, saying you want to buy the most exotic sports car in the world, and they can produce them at 4 a year, and there's a waiting list of 150. You ain't never going to get the exotic sports car. These Patriot missiles will never show up in Ukraine. The Russians are just going to put the pedal to the metal. In the next 50 days, rather than the Russians slowing things down, I think you're going to see Russia pounding. Any shipment that makes its way into Ukraine will be destroyed as soon as possible. Look at all the drones that are coming in. They're pounding warehouses. They're pounding factories, anything. The totality of Ukraine's defense industry infrastructure is being wasted. Everything that comes in is being destroyed. Hardly any of it's getting to the front lines. This is the reality, and it's just going to get worse for Ukraine. Every time Great Britain or France or somebody signs a drone deal and they say we're going to increase the drone production capability gets targeted and taken out. This is the reality of Ukraine. And for Donald Trump to sit there and shove nonsense down our throat, I want to save lives. All you did is condemn even more Ukrainians to die. Yes, some Russians will die too, but not nearly in the numbers that you think they are. There is no leverage over Russia right now. You just look like the fool you are. The other thing is, if I were Taiwan, everybody else looking at this, I'd say, this man's a nut. He can't be trusted. He's not serious. It's all posturing. It's all about him, but it's not about real security, real outcomes. I mean, it's this. As an American, I am humiliated by the president's behavior.
Do you think that Donald Trump still believes that it would be beneficial to the United States if they can put an end to the conflict in Ukraine, or he was somehow convinced that the continuation of the war would benefit the United States.
I don't think the benefit of the United States factors into anything Donald Trump does. I think he is, how do I get the Nobel Peace Prize? And I hate to say this, but it really comes down to that. This is all about him posturing himself to be seen as the great peacemaker. It's not about real deals. Come on, Nima, look at the fine print of the U.S. Ukrainian rare earth mineral deal. It's not a deal. It's fake. That's supposed to benefit the United States? No, it doesn't. It humiliates America. Nothing he does benefits the United States. Everything he does humiliates us and makes matters worse. It's all about posturing Donald J. Trump as the greatest thing on the world. He's a snake oil salesman. He's a grifter. He's a con artist. He's not the president of the United States. I mean, he is in name, but the function, he doesn't do anything to benefit the United States. Nothing. Everything is done to make his image look good. Look at his whole tariff policy. We're not, I mean, you have to laugh at Besson. We're going to get $100 billion. You haven't collected that money, Scott Besson. You haven't collected that money. This is just smoke and mirrors. Everything he does is smoke and mirrors. There's no substance to it. There's no reality to it. And it's all a grift. Look at Pete Hegseth coming out with his drone policy. We're going to have drone dominance. No, you're not. But it's cute. You got to play. I mean, Metallica. I think Metallica got mad that you played Enter the Sandman. They didn't like that, so you had to change the video. But it was cool for a while because it took you back to the day when you were a young, hard-charging Army officer, when you played that heavy metal to lift weights, because you lift a lot of weights, Pete. I've seen you out there, baby, doing the push-ups, the rucksack. You are a stud. So you'll play Metallica and you sit there and you read from a script. And you're not too good at reading, though, are you? Because you spend a lot of time lifting weights, not too much time working the brain. But then the drone flies in, flown by some guy over there, and it delivers a piece of paper. And he takes it. I mean, this is drone dominance. Holy cow, did you see it? A drone flew to him and gave him a piece of paper. Then he signed it. What did he sign? Nothing. The whole purpose of that was to generate the stock prices of a couple defense industries involved in the blue list. The blue list is a list of commercial drone technologies that the Pentagon back in 2020 started to say we can buy these things and adapt them for this, and they do it. But we don't do drones the way everybody else does drones. I mean, I like that also, and we'll look at some things like we'll do some 3D printing. We'll push it forward to the troops. Yeah, there'll be a 3D printer in the battalion office, and there'll be a sergeant major there. You know, have you filed out the appropriate forms to 3D print? You know, okay, sign it here, sign it there. 3D printer's down; it's broken right now. We don't have time to fit. Anybody who's been in the U.S. military knows what's going to happen. That ain't going to happen. Meanwhile, the Russians and the Ukrainians got 3D printers right there at the front lines, printing stuff out, cranking it out. There ain't no sergeant major there checking things off. They're just doing it. They're doing it. There's a kid sitting there pulling out without anybody over his shoulders, doing the modifications necessary. And he put in his own little modification because he called the guy at the front and said, hey, they're doing this. So he did it. He didn't get permission from anybody to do that. He just did it, delivered the drone, bam, on a tank, destroyed it. Next one came in, got jammed. He came in, fixed it up on his own, didn't get anybody's permission, and did it. That's how you get drone dominance. That's what the Russians are doing. That's what the Ukrainians are doing. They're pretty good at it too. That ain't what Pete Hegseth is talking about. He's talking about American military bureaucracy in a peacetime environment, and you will never get drone dominance. It's a joke. But this is everything about Donald Trump's administration is a joke. It's all a grift. It's all a con. It's all a scam. There's nothing real about any of this.
Scott, what does Germany want from these long-range missiles, Typhoon-type missiles? And because 2,000 kilometers, it seems that you want to hit Russia. How is that going to be perceived by Russia, and how is that going to change the mindset of Russia toward a security architecture vis-a-vis?
Let me make this as clear as possible to everybody, to you and everybody else. Russia doesn't give a flying you know what. Okay, you're manifesting yourself as a threat. We therefore shall now reallocate the resources necessary to deal with the threat. Germany doesn't understand. They're playing a game they can't win. Russia will blow Germany off the face of the map. The Russians have not forgotten what Germany was. And you now have Peskov saying Germany is becoming an enemy again. And if Germany wants to be an enemy, Russia knows how to deal with enemies. Hey, Typhoon, let me introduce you to Oreshnik. Russians are producing more Oreshniks than the Germans will have access to Typhoons. And Germany will disappear in a sea of conventional fire and explosion. There won't even be nuclear weapons involved. It'll just be the end of Germany. The Russians aren't playing games. They are building over 1,000 uranium drones, Shahed 136 modifications a day. 1,000 a day. And they're going to be firing 1,000 a day into Ukraine. Germany wants to play a game. Guess what, Germany? You don't have enough Patriot air defense systems. You don't have enough Iris-Ts. You don't have enough anything. When Russia decides to flood the zone with 5,000 drones in a day, your entire country goes bye-bye. And then they're going to hit you with Oreshniks. They're going to hit you with calibers. They're going to hit you with all the other hypersonics that they have out there. The Germans are just stupid. They really are stupid. I mean, we've been watching the rebirth, the Fourth Reich being born for some time now. I've been worrying about it. It's real. These morons are out there. The only good news is that Merz isn't Adolf Hitler. He has no political viability or sustainability. And the German military is just a bunch of, academic nobodies. I mean, this isn't, the German, the Wehrmacht. There was that 100,000 man army during the Weimar Republic of all World War I, handpicked World War I veterans, all officers that became the cadre of the Wehrmacht, and it grew into. The Bundeswehr is full of schnitzel-eating, beer-drinking, fat idiots who don't know anything about war, don't know how to train, haven't put a 90-pound ruck on their back and hiked in anger, and they don't know what they're doing. Now, could they transform into something? Of course, but where's their defense industry? Other than a handful of Rheinmetall making some money, they can't produce a lot of tanks. They can't produce a lot. They've deindustrialized. In order to get where Germany wants to go, they got to spend money they don't have, and they have to get an economy that doesn't function to support a defense industry that doesn't exist. So it's all talk. But at some point in time, their words are going to result in some sort of limited action that's going to trigger Russia. And Russia, I can guarantee you, isn't talk. Russia doesn't want war. But my God, if the Germans want to bring it on, there ain't going to be nothing to make the Russians happier than putting the stake through the heart of this stupidity, this German defense minister, this German chancellor who talks about, Germany's going to do it again, but do it right this time. What does that mean, do it right this time? That means you don't regret doing what you did. The only thing you regret is that you got beat. That it would all been okay had Germany won the war. You don't regret anything. You don't regret the Holocaust. You don't regret slaughtering Jews. You don't regret the whole Lebensraum policy you had against the Russians. The Germans, had they been left to their own volition, would have captured all of Russia up to the Ural Mountains, depopulated. That means killed them, millions, tens of millions, and then enslaved the rest. That was doing it right, according to the Germans are a sick society. I hate to say it, but the fact of the matter is, Franklin Roosevelt had it right during the Quebec Conference of 1943. Churchill said that when this war is over, Germany has to be converted into an agrarian society. They can never again be allowed to have access to industry because this is going to happen. Everything that's happening right now was predicted back then because the Germans are a sick society. There's something wrong with the Germans fundamentally. Tell me I'm wrong. Listen to their statements. The fact that you have a German chancellor and a German defense minister making these statements and the millions of Germans aren't in the streets saying, never again, not in our name, that will not happen. Instead, they sit there like the compliant good Germans there. Oh, we don't know what to do, but our arms keep twitching because we want to do something, but we don't know what we want to do. You know what you want to do because you're all Nazis at heart. Scratch a German, get a Nazi. This is the fact. It's playing out in front of us. But, Pistorius and Merz, they're trying to create something, this Fourth Reich. And it should scare the hell out of everybody. It should scare the hell out of the Americans. I mean, it's not just the Russians that, paid a price. We went to war against them too. Yes, we are to blame for the rise of the Fourth Reich. We're the ones that worked with the Germans. Study the history at the end of World War II and what happened to the Wehrmacht. And study what happened to the generals. Everybody talks about the Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg trials, oh, we showed them Nazis. We didn't show them anything. The Nuremberg trials were a setup. It was a con. Yeah, they did the high-profile trials of the big Nazi leaders. When it came to the generals, they whitewashed the whole thing. And it was done with led by Donovan, who was the head of the OSS, precursor to the CIA, working with John McCloy, Truman's handpicked German, overseer, Dwight D. Eisenhower. They made a decision from the start to whitewash the Nazi crimes of the Wehrmacht. One of the first things that happened after the German generals were captured is they were tasked by Donovan, who was the head of the OSS, to write their history, but write it the way they want the world to perceive the German army as a good army. And they used that to color the defense in the Nuremberg trials. Seidel, who ended up being the first German general to become commander in the new expanded NATO in 1955, 10 years after he was a Nazi. He was put on trial along with 20 other generals, and they were found guilty of war crimes, killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians in Norway, in Greece, in France, and all the occupied zones. He, Seidel, was responsible, found guilty, sentenced to 20 years, didn't serve a day. Why? Well, because he, along with the others, whitewashed their history. He wrote a book, Invasion 1944, about the Normandy invasion from the perspective of the Germans, making it look as though the Germans were simply doing honorable military work, fighting. This was the campaign, and we were military people, ignoring the fact that while that was happening, the troops he commanded were slaughtering French civilians for the crimes that he ended up being held accountable for. They're all dirty. Every single German armed officer, every general soldier was dirty. They committed the crimes, especially against Russia. This is why the Russians will never forget. You have Halder, who was the chief of staff of the German armed forces. In 1941, he signed the Commissar Order. You know what the Commissar Order is? That you capture a political commissar, member of the Communist Party. Every unit had one. You kill him on the spot. Kill him on the spot. Then the Communist Order. Kill them all. Von Manstein escaped it because he signed an order that said, we won't implement this. And everybody went, oh, good, look, he's not a no, read the rest of the print. We won't implement it because it slows down our advance too much. Gather them all together and send them to the rear and let the other people kill them. It's not that he said we're not going to do this because we're good Germans. He just said it slows us down. Let's get them to the back and let them kill them all. He had no problem with killing them. He just didn't want to do it up front. Every single German officer was bad, and yet this is what became the Bundeswehr. The Nazi army was restructured to become the Bundeswehr as part of NATO. And they've been hiding in the shadows ever since. And now they're coming out. This is the reality of Germany today. It is the Fourth Reich. It's the scariest thing that's happened in Europe in a long time. And if it doesn't get nipped in the bud, we're going to be looking at another European war where Germany is at the heart of it. Germany is not the friend of the United States. Germany is only the friend of Germany. That's something people need to pay close attention to going forward. Germany is the threat.
Isn't somehow amazing that the country that is literally winning the conflict in Ukraine is willing to negotiate, to talk with Ukraine and with the United States, but the administration in Ukraine is not willing to negotiate, while they know that they're losing on the battlefield, they're losing politically. Even the support, we can talk about the support coming from the West, but the support has been drastically diminished, has been drastically reduced if we compares it to what it was before, Scott. Do you understand at this stage what does Zelensky want from the conflict? Is that the same as we see as New York Times pointed out about Netanyahu and his position? He's continuing the conflict because of his position. Is that all about his position? I don't know if Europeans would be in the same position as Netanyahu and Zelensky.
First of all, you can't compare the two. Netanyahu, who I despise openly, is the legitimate byproduct of the Israeli democratic process. He's a legitimate prime minister. I mean, he's been around forever, Likud party. Netanyahu is Netanyahu, supported by the right-wing Zionists, etc. But he's an Israeli leader. Zelensky is a manufactured event. He's not a leader. He's an actor, literally an actor, a comedian turned actor. Let me remind the audience, what brought him into national forefront was the fact that he starred in a TV show called Servant of the People. It's a cute little show. I saw it. I thought it was pretty funny, where he plays a teacher, an everyman, who goes off on a spiel. Somebody records, he goes on the internet, and then he becomes the president of Ukraine. And his job is to do good things for the Ukrainian. And then I think after season 2 or 3, the shortened season 3, he suddenly became the president of Ukraine. Because Holomowski, the guy who supported this, the guy who ran the media thing that picked this, made this happen, who was working with the British who picked this was a MI6 operation from the start. British intelligence, together with the CIA, needed to get rid of they couldn't have, Poroshenko continuing to front because he's a corrupt oligarch and all that. So the oligarch said, we're going to pick a fresh face. Now, how do you sell this BS to the Ukrainian people? You put on a TV show. You can laugh about it and say, how foolish are they? There was a period of time where Martin Sheen, who played an American president in a TV series called The West Wing, he was mulling a run for the presidency. Why? Because every American who saw Martin Sheen went, he's the president of the United States. Because they watched the TV show and they believed it. That's half the battle here, perception. He's perceived as a leader. And Zelensky was able to say, I played a president on TV, therefore I can be the president. I'm believable. And he was going back and he basically regurgitated to the Ukrainian people the same spiel that he gave on the TV series about corruption. We need to do this. I believe in peace, all this kind of stuff. He didn't believe any of that. He's a cocaine snorting homosexual deviant. That is him. Now, that doesn't mean that all homosexuals are deviants, but he is. He is a deviant. He lived a lifestyle that would have made, cabaret performers in Berlin in the 1920s and early 30s blush. He's not a good person. He's a very bad person as a human being, his heart. But he's a convincing actor, a convincing performer. And the British and the Ukrainians were able to convert this guy into a symbol, and he became the president of Ukraine. And immediately after becoming the president of Ukraine, had to deviate from the promises he made, which was all a lie, to the real agenda. Because this man who said, I would crawl on my knees to Putin, crawl on my knees to have peace, who convinced all the Russian-speaking people out there that he truly believed in resolving the situation in the Donbass nonviolently. No. Immediately convened a war conference. There's a videotape of him saying, I will go to war. I will go to war. That's him. So he's been playing a role ever since. So we can't speak of Zelensky as a Netanyahu. He is a controlled resource, a controlled asset. Why did Trump get mad at Zelensky? Think about it for a moment. Because he broke script. Zelensky forgot for a moment that his job was just to shut up and nod his head. That's what the script said. The president of Ukraine will look at the president of the United States with admiration, smile, and nod the head knowingly. And Zelensky went, no. I actually think I'm the president of Ukraine right now, so I'm going to interrupt the president. Bah! No, you're not. Slap down. Zelensky doesn't get to think on his own. He doesn't get to do anything on his own. And when he does, he gets opposed by Yermak, the head of the presidential administration, who is the control mechanism of the oligarchs. Sit there, head up the presidential administration, and keep this actor in place. And whenever Zelensky thinks that he can do something, they put him on a tour, and he's reminded in private meetings that he's a nobody. He's just a figurehead. So let's stop talking about what Zelensky wants. Also, what Zelensky wants is a script that makes sense to him, because he thought he was an actor playing a heroic role, and now he's given a script that says, "You're gonna get wait. What's the final scene? I'm going to get strung up by my heels like Mussolini in the center square, and people are going to spit on my dead body. That's what's going to happen. Yep, that's exactly what's going to happen to you, Zelensky, because you're nothing. You're nothing. You're a throwaway talent that's lost his utility. You're the guy. You're the character in a show that the show's still popular. Believe me, the war in Ukraine's popular. Look at the Germans. They need it. They need the war in Ukraine. But they don't need Zelensky. He's a problem. And so you know what happens when the showrunners meet at the end of the series and they go, well, what are we going to do next season? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the president because nobody likes him anymore. He's not a convincing character, and we're going to write him off. Meanwhile, the actor's sitting there running around as if he's got the next season coming up and he's going to be the big star. And then they show him the script and he goes, "You're dead." What? I don't want to die. That's Zelensky. Let's stop talking about Zelensky as if he's a leader of anything. The Russians don't recognize him as a leader. They won't even do business with him. They say, "We'll meet with him. We'll meet with an actor." I mean, President Putin meets with, anybody who wants to shake his hand. Not anybody, but I mean, he meets with a lot of people. That doesn't mean that he's going to, sign a business relationship with them. The Russians are very legally minded. For them to have any agreement with Ukraine requires legitimacy on the part of the people participating in the process. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that Vladimir Putin is the president of Russia. There is no doubt that anybody he appoints under him has to do a job, has the authority of the Russian government behind them. Zelensky is not the legitimate president of Ukraine. Hasn't been for some time now. Constitutionally, can't do it. And I know the West sits there and rewrites it's a war. It doesn't say that in the Constitution. The fact is, right now, the leader of Ukraine constitutionally is the Speaker of the Parliament. That's who the Russians are saying, we'll do business with that person. But what we prefer is that you have new elections and you guys pick somebody who then can sit down and sign the document of surrender. But it ain't going to be Zelensky because he's not in a position to surrender anything. And that's the reality. And this is the reality of the whole government that he's built around them. The most corrupt edifice in the world. It doesn't represent Ukraine. It doesn't represent the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian nation. It only represents their own individual corrupt interests. So we can't compare Zelensky with Netanyahu at all, except that they're both scumbags.
Here is what Financial Times reported, Scott. It says that Donald Trump privately urged Ukraine to strike deep inside Russian territory. And if we assume they have some sort of plan for Zelensky and his administration, is that going to be the last scene, the last take of that movie?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful of this because there were some other reports out there too. Another report that said Donald Trump was considering providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. And the Russians have come out and wisely said, we've seen reports like these before, and they've almost always turned out to be lies. I can't imagine any scenario where the President of the United States, having been briefed appropriately by his intelligence community, would ask Zelensky if he could strike Moscow, knowing what the consequences of that would be. Except that this president is pretty stupid. I mean, I get off the phone with Vladimir Putin, and he's talking all nice to me, but then he goes around and he bombs Ukraine. Why, Donnie baby? Why? Engage 3 brain cells in that orange-colored face of yours. Because you had them attack Russian strategic resources. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, Donald Trump lives in this imaginary fake world, where the one I also love is when he said, I said I had a good phone call with Vladimir Putin, and Melania says he bombed another city last night. Oh, he's a bad man. Really? Is this where we're at? No way. Way. Okay, that's literally a quote from the president. No way. According to him, that's what Vladimir Putin told him. No way. You're not going to bomb Moscow. Way, Donald Trump said, as if this is a frat party. But that's the fantasy world that Donald Trump lives in. I don't believe these conversations took place. And if they did take place, I would have a hard time seeing responsible people allowing it to be manifested because we know what the outcome will be. Okay, Russia is just begging for an excuse to unveil Oreshnik in its full glory. Remember what Vladimir Putin has said, that what makes Oreshnik especially destructive is the concentration of heat-based explosive destruction that can be done when you concentrate them. If you take a look, the Oreshnik hit here, 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 here. Now, could you imagine all of the Oreshnik submunitions hitting in the one place? The destruction would be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb. And now imagine a dozen Oreshniks being fired. Guys, we need to stop listening to the Financial Times. We need to stop listening to any of these ridiculous media outlets. If they don't name a source, it's probably not an accurate report, especially when you're talking about extreme policies of this. Because even Donald Trump, in his ego-addled brain, isn't stupid enough to believe that Ukraine could actually get away with that.
Actually, the other day we had a report on Axios talking about that Vladimir Putin behind the scene is somehow pushing for zero enrichment on part of Iran. And I reached the Iranian official, they said, no, nothing happened of that sort. And
That's the kind of source. Yeah, that's the same source.
Yeah,
wishful thinking on the part of idiots who want relevance, or I think what their job is to, and it's a concerted effort. You put out a headline of this sort, and you start to get people playing like the idea of this shows you the amateurishness that the Iranians would wake up in the morning and go, "What? Putin's going behind our back. That son of a gun. We're outraged. We need to change our stashes with the Russians," as opposed to reading it going, "Hey, Aragchi, yeah, you were just talking to Lavrov the other day, right? Yeah. What do you think?" Nah, I didn't think so either. The Iranians and the Russians have their way of doing diplomacy, their way of sharing information, but these amateur propagandists actually think that putting lies out there are going to get. It's like they wanted to get the Russians. You're going to strike Moscow. You're going to maybe we should. Putin, you have to think about leaving the city. They're going to strike Moscow. We have to change everything we're doing. We have to reallocate air defense resources from where we have them on the front line. No, they're going to strike Moscow. We have to build a layered defense. We have to spend all our time. The Russians are going, nah, don't worry about it. We're not worried about it. Because if they do, we know what we're going to do. And it's, this is stupidity. These propagandists actually think that the Russians and the Iranians read this crap and pay attention to it. This is fodder for the mindless American masses.
And it's all about they're doing everything to go against Russia. It's about Russia, Scott. It's not about Iran, in my opinion, because they're trying to say that, look at what Russia does to Iran. So you can imagine what Russia, somehow they're trying to draw a line between Iran and Russia by a thing at this point that we're living. They're so close. They're so close. Nobody would imagine in the West how close the government, the establishment, or the political parties, decision makers in both countries are close to each other.
Yeah, it's a relationship of trust, and trust that has been earned. There's a lot of people that are trying to create this. They're trying to use Syria as a leverage against Russia and Iran. And yes, there were differences of policy in Syria. The Russians made no bones about it. The Russians did not want Iran establishing themselves near the Golan Heights. And they said, we that's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to put up Assad, and if Iran is here to help Assad, but we're not here to actually shoehorn Iran into a favorable position against Israel. And so they had a difference of opinion, but they also worked together very closely. They collaborated together in Syria to achieve important results. And they also collaborated together. I mean, the whole Shahed drone thing where the Russians came in, the Iranians turned around and did this. There is a relationship here that is mature. I have very good friends that I've known for a lifetime. Guys that I met when I first went to Russia, Americans. We disagree on Ukraine. Fundamentally, vehemently, we're still the best of friends. And if it came time for me to ask for them to help me, or for me to help them, which we both have done, everything's dropped and the help's done, and we never have to worry about, are they going to stab me in the back? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? No, because that's what friendship's about. But people don't understand that Russia and Iran can have differences of opinion diplomatically on certain issues and still maintain a close relationship based upon trust. And you've seen it. You're 100% right to point it out. One of the major bylines in the propaganda conflict being waged post-Israel-Iran conflict is the betrayal of Iran by Russia. But where you're not hearing it from Iranian officials, and you're not hearing Russians going, well, they don't trust us anymore. You're reading it in the West, unsourced, anonymous, high-level government officials saying stuff like this. It's non-existent. First of all, the U.S. doesn't have enough quality intelligence to know what the hell's going on inside Russia and Iran in terms of their relations. But maybe the Israelis do. I mean, still have to give the Israelis credit. They had a hell of an intelligence game plan in play, and it's something the Iranians, I would imagine, are trying to clean up before round 2 starts.
Scott, here is Tim Weiner. He's just picturing the situation in Ukraine and how the things have been developed during the years and to the final stage of the conflict in Ukraine. Here is what he said.
2014, when Putin seized the Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, the CIA has been on the ground in Kyiv and beyond, working to help Ukraine survive. And it has played a crucial role in that survival. When the CIA stole Putin's war plans for Ukraine in late 2021 and told the world about it, initially NATO nations were skeptical, like, really? Aren't you the people that told us that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction? But the intelligence was true. And that had an electrifying, galvanizing effect on NATO, and that support flowing from Europe has, in addition to U.S. support, helped ensure Ukraine's survival. The CIA's been working against the Russians since 1947, and now for a decade for Ukraine. Imagine you wake up, you're a CIA officer, and you realize early in this administration that the President of the United States has joined the authoritarian axis, that he is voting with Russia and North Korea and Iran at the United Nations against a resolution condemning Russia's occupation of Ukraine. It was a head-spinning, gut-wrenching day for them when that vote took place in February. And every day these guys go to work trying to, subvert the Kremlin and support Ukraine. And it's been a difficult 6 months.
The establishment is so desperate, Scott, to continue the conflict. They're doing whatever. I do believe that they're trying to somehow, through European leaders, to convince Donald Trump to continue the conflict. But the way that this guy is picturing the situation, how honest he's just picturing, drawing the cases, the way that CIA was trying to do something together. He didn't mention MI6, but I believe that MI6 was totally involved in the coup in 2014, in the aftermath of the coup. And right now, it's somehow, in my opinion, they're bolder than CIA in Ukraine, considering what's going on right now with the Zelensky administration. Your take on that?
Well, gosh, how do I proceed here? Tim Weiner's, he's not to be trusted on any of this. I've known Tim Weiner for a long time. He is the equivalent of a CIA historian, even though he doesn't work for the CIA. His job is to spin everything to the favor of the CIA. When I resigned as a weapons inspector in Iraq, having spent 7 years working intimately with the CIA at every level on the issue of Iraq and WMD, he was one of the people tasked with, countering what I was saying, and I just despise the man because I know what I know, now I know it, and I know that when he starts talking about things that I was intimately involved in encountering it, I know who his sources are. He's not a legitimate journalist. He's not a legitimate historian. He might as well be on the payroll of the CIA. He was that way with Iraq and WMD, and he's that way on this story right now. He's giving you the CIA approved narrative, which is designed to do two things: spin things, in a way that puts the CIA in a good light, and then, shape public perceptions. Let me make the following observation about the CIA. Anytime you have somebody talking about the CIA officially and acting as if they have sources in the CIA does not function. It's not designed to function in the sunlight. It's not how the CIA operates. The CIA is all about lies, deceit, deception. Hell, you had Mike Pompeo brag about it, if you remember, when he was the director of the CIA. So if you have somebody coming out saying, my sources in the CIA say this, stop, finish, done. Because the only reason they're talking to you is because they're trying to achieve a propaganda aspect here, an information operation against the American public. The CIA will never tell the truth. Doesn't mean the truth can't be found out, but the CIA is incapable of telling the truth. They're not designed to tell the truth, especially about covert operations. They're covert for a reason: deniability. So when the CIA speaks, it's because there's a need to speak to shape the perception, to take you away from the direction they want. Go the exact opposite direction of what Weiner said. And that's the reality. He's shaping something, trying to create something, because they don't want you looking here. They want you over here. And that's all I have to say about Tim Weiner. He's a disgusting journalist. He's not a journalist. He's a CIA hack. And his job is to work with the CIA to deflect public attention away from where it needs to be focused.
Scott, if you were to mention the main goals, and let's assume A, B, C, and Netanyahu had 3 goals to go to Washington to talk with Donald Trump, what could have been those 3 goals? And because nobody's talking about the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, and nothing of that sort came out in the news, in the mainstream media, but what has happened during the meeting and what was the main goal of that meeting?
Goal number 1, I'll just refer you to Donald Trump's social media postings before Netanyahu showed up, where we're exclusively on interfering with Israeli judicial proceedings against the corrupt Israeli prime minister. Netanyahu was in court, and Trump is posting, "You can't do this. I'll sanction you. Let this man go. Free Bibi." The whole spiel. Bibi's in a domestic political crisis. He's in a lot of trouble. So the very first thing they were talking about is how Donald Trump can help stabilize the situation in Israel. Bibi is telling them who the enemy is, who's the problem, where it's coming from, and then Donald Trump will turn to his people and say, make that problem go away. And there was a whole conspiracy against Israel being run by the White House to prop up Benjamin Netanyahu. That was the first thing. The second thing is Iran and planning phase 2 of this conflict. What the United States is willing to support, what they're not willing to support, what the red lines will be, but shaping the inevitability of round 2, because there will be a round 2, especially if Iran doesn't, yield on the nuclear issues. And then 3 was Gaza, Hamas, shaping the post-conflict, the post-October 7th reality of the Middle East, to include we're back. to include it's shaping the Middle East, Gaza, Hezbollah, Syria, and Abrams Accords and things of that nature. So, although I think Hezbollah would be more linked to Iran, but what's going to happen in Gaza, and how the United States will get Abrams Accords 2.0 on track. People need to remember the emphasis that Benjamin Netanyahu placed on normalization of relations and posturing Israel as a key hub, economic hub for the Middle East. I think in September of 2023, about a month prior to the October 7th attack, Joe Biden was in India with, I think, the G20 meeting, and he made an announcement about the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. And right after he made that announcement, Netanyahu came out and said, this is one of the most important days in modern Israeli history. Did you hear what I said? One of the most important days and events in modern Israel, because this was the liberation. This was freedom. If they could implement this, Israel stops being this parasite that can only exist by sucking the lifeblood out of America and Europe. And Israel is on the path of becoming actually a viable entity, the central entity, the glue that holds the Middle East together. That was the plan. And then it collapsed. And now we have this disaster taking place. And so I believe they spent a lot of time talking about how they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because this plan of the India Middle East Economic Corridor, the Abrams Accord, that's Humpty Dumpty. He sat on a wall, but he had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And Trump is talking about how we can do that. Get the super glue, put it in, what things have to happen. So I think those are the three things: saving Bibi's political butt, resolving Iran Hezbollah, and how to get Humpty Dumpty put back together again.
Scott, did you watch the interview that Mandy Patinkin had with New York Times? He was talking about Netanyahu, and he said that Netanyahu is somehow changing the nature and the identity of Israel. And he mentioned a scene of a movie that at the end. Yeah. Go ahead. Your take on that. I know that you're familiar with the case.
Well, first of all, I love The Princess Bride. That's it's one of those movies that I could watch over and over and over again. It's just brilliantly written. It's a wonderful story, and Mandy Patinkin does a great job, playing a Spaniard out for revenge. I think the quote he gives is, "I've been in the revenge business for so long, I don't know how to live," and that's Benjamin Netanyahu. The problem, though, with Mandy's tale is that it doesn't add up. Netanyahu is not a recent manifestation. Netanyahu is the man who ordered the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin back in 1995 or 6, November 90. I don't know. I can't. I'm getting old, but I was there, so I want to say, was it 95? Or 96, because I had good relations.
It's 95.
95, okay.
November 4th.
95, yeah. I was in Israel, and I remember being, while I was there, the headlines. I mean, because there was a rally, and Netanyahu, is there, and there's a right-wing rabbi that comes up, and he invokes some sort of Talmudic bullshit about, how Yitzhak Rabin has betrayed the Jews, and therefore he is no longer protected as a Jew, and he can be killed as a goyim or something of this nature. And the assassin was in there going, "Yeah." And I remember I was being driven to where I worked out. I would go inside the Kiryat for meetings, but the place I worked was a intelligence facility outside of the Kiryat, and I was driven there by an Israeli lieutenant colonel. And I remember going in the morning, and he said, "Rabin's going to hold a peace rally here tonight," as we passed the stadium. And I went, "Oh, cool, maybe I'll go." And I just sort of said, "Maybe I'll go." And then on the way home, back to the hotel, he said, "Stay away, don't go." And the Israelis never once told me I couldn't go somewhere or couldn't do that. I mean, basically, it was my time off. I could go. I'd rent a car and go up to Nazareth and see the things. I would tour the Holy Land and all this kind of stuff. But this one, he said, "Don't go." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "They're probably going to kill Yitzhak Rabin tonight." "What are you talking about?" He said, "No, he's not listening to anybody. There's right-wing fanatics out there that want him dead. He's not going to wear a body vest. He's going to make a speech. And just don't go. There's going to be violence." So I didn't go. I went to dinner instead with two Israeli officers and their fiancées. And I remember sitting in the restaurant, and we're sitting there, talking. And all of a sudden, the restaurant owner comes out and just says, Yitzhak Rabin has been shot and he is dead. Our prime minister is dead. And everybody at that moment in time just stopped and got up. Nobody paid the bills. I mean, I was sitting there as they walked away going, we have to pay for the food. And they're like, everybody just went home and went into mourning, straight up mourning, national mourning. And from that moment on, Israel changed, because then that was also about the same time that Israel was opening the floodgates for the Russian and Ukrainian, Jewish immigrants post, Cold War. And I remember talking to the Israelis. They said this fundamentally will change everything, because it's going to change the political dynamic of Israel. It's going to stack the demographics in favor of Netanyahu's Likud party with people who don't understand the Palestinians, who hate the Palestinians. They'll be seeking to impose, a very strict Zionist approach on this. They said this, and I remember talking to the Israeli intelligence officer responsible for doing the national assessments. And I remember when I first started, Iraq was the number one. They were going to kill Saddam Hussein. That's how much they put on, rolled around. Iraq was like 6 or 8. Iran was down there. The number one threat was right-wing Jewish extremism in
Can you hear me, Scott? Yeah. Something happened here. Let me just call it. Yeah. Okay, you're back or not? Okay. Oh, like that was a sensitive issue that you were talking. Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to put an end to this talk because the internet is dead on the part of Scott. And thank you so much for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.